Hi, everybody. I'm thrilled to be interviewing Tim Shriver today. The City Biz audience is in for a very special guest. Tim leads the International Board of Directors of the Special Olympics. And if you haven't heard of the Special Olympics, they serve together with 6 million, I believe, athletes in 200 countries or more to promote health, education in a more unified world through the joy of sports. And that you would think is the only endeavor a person would have time for. But Tim is also the co-founder and currently chairs the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, a leading school reform organization in the field of social and emotional learning. But I came to know of Tim's work while I had heard of those other endeavors through something related to the work of the Bridge Alliance in trying to bring our country together. And that is something called Unite, and a entity within the Unite called the Dignity Index. And the Dignity Index was created to help bring us together as a country to, as the word implies, treat ourselves, whether it's in politics, family, community, or the workplace, with greater dignity. So without going on, and I could with this bio, but we'd run out of time for the interview. Thank you, Tim, so much for participating in this City Biz interview. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, David, and thank you for that generous introduction. I could go on and on about all the work you're doing and have done also, and I'm really grateful for the common ground we occupy, but also just for all the ways in which you've tried to move our country and move us as individuals to a more healthy and a more hopeful space. So I'm happy to be with you.
Well, thank you. Well, why don't we start by, if you could fill in briefly the audience, the philosophy behind the Dignity Index and what it actually has done and is doing, and then we'll dig in deeper as to perhaps the difficulties, the challenges, the successes related to it.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of simple in a way, David. There's a lot of people talking about divisiveness and polarization, and you're familiar with maybe dozens, if not hundreds of different groups. And I think we all share a common hope that the future will be less angry, less hostile, less paralyzing, less depressing in a way. But we come at the problem from slightly different directions. The unique, I would hope, or maybe suggest, the unique dimension that the Dignity Index organization or work occupies is the diagnostic that we do not have a problem of difference. We do not have a problem of political difference of opinion or cultural differences of opinion. Instead, we have a problem of contempt. We have a problem in the way in which we treat each other when we differ. Our view is that difference is normal, it's to be expected, and it's even healthy. In a democracy is predicated on the idea that people will have differences of opinion and find ways to resolve those differences through some kind of collaborative process or democratic process. So we try to move the dial away from, well, let's figure out how we can resolve all differences on immigration or on taxes, or that's not our concern. Our concern is how we treat each other when we differ. And so what we did, David, was in order to kind of get a little more concrete about this and sort of avoid the world of kind of theoretical, oh, well, we should be kinder to each other, all that kind of stuff. We built a scoring tool. So it's not so much what you think you're doing, but you can actually score yourself. If you and I disagree and I characterize you as a jerk, I can score myself on that. David and I disagree on the border. His position is X, my position is Y. He's a jerk, and he's lost his mind, and he's going to ruin the country. Okay, now, it has nothing to do with whether my opinion is right about the border, but I can score myself a 2 for the way in which I characterized you. You're going to ruin the country. And I can look at the index and say, well, I could have characterized you using 5 language or 7 language. I could have said, David and I disagree profoundly. My position is that his is deeply misguided, but I want to learn from him. and I want to listen to him, and I want to be open to the possibility that in some ways I might not have it all together right, and he might have something to teach me. That would be a 7. So it doesn't change my position. It just changes the way I treat you in the difference. So that's the idea of the dignity index, that we can score ourselves, but when we score ourselves, we're not trying to catch people or silence people or neuter people's passions. We're just trying to reveal the options we have about how we treat each other. So if the problem at its core that we're facing as a country, as a culture, as a world maybe even, is that we have increasing pressure on our relationships and reduced capacity to hold them, to hold our relationships as places in which we treat each other with dignity, then what we need is not a political movement, we need a dignity movement. And that's our hope.
Well, it certainly speaks to my heart as a co-founder of the Bridge Alliance, an alliance of, as you mentioned, over 100 organizations working for civil political discourse, which is the dignity part of it,
Yeah.
as well as the analytical, critical thinking part of it. And I've been doing this for 13 years, and I am having difficult, and the field as a whole is doing some self-searching now. And I'm curious what your thoughts on it, given the fact of the who won the past election for president of the United States, Donald Trump, and his strategy that seems very successful of not using dignity as a tool for political to get the backing and political support of the citizenry. Do you find that maybe there should be, I know the field as a whole is asking a lot of questions. Are you rethinking any of your philosophies now in terms of strategy on how to get more Americans to actually believe in this and actually vote based on personality traits? And
Yeah. Well, I think you've brought up a couple of separate points, honestly. I'd say the one question is what works in presidential politics? And I think everyone has come to the conclusion, we've all come to the conclusion that we've underestimated the extent to which contempt works in presidential politics. And President Trump and many Democratic candidates also, I don't think we need to be overly partisan about this, have used a lot of contempt, and political theoreticians have been saying this to us for a long time. Hey, going negative works in politics. And sometimes it does. And sometimes it works in our relationships, Sometimes it feels good to be contemptuous of our spouses or our children or our parents, our best friend who's, betrayed our trust. So we have to recognize that when we say we want to build a dignity movement, we're not saying that contempt never works. It does. Sadly, it does. What we're saying is it doesn't work in the long run. So this recent election in the United States did nothing, I would argue, to heal the relationships in our families and in our communities. And if it had gone the other way, it wouldn't have done anything either, to be honest. You'd have half the country that's now happy, sad, and you'd have half the country that's sad now, happy. But it wouldn't have healed the contempt that separates us. So if anything, when contempt does prevail in the culture, it magnifies the urgency of building subcultures where dignity and respect and humanity prevail. We're not going to be able to take on the algorithm and take on partisan media and take on political negativity all at once. That group of entities, we call it after Arthur Brooks, the outrage industrial complex, that is the dominant cultural machinery that we're living in. We have only one choice, which you have been a master of, which is to build alternate subcultures where people can feel and model and experience an alternative. That's how culture changes. Culture, if you look at any big cultural change over the last 20 or 50 or 100 years, it almost invariably started with a subculture that modeled an alternative to the dominant culture. And then the subculture started to get adherence. And people started to say, hey, you know what? I want to live over there. I want to be on the platform where people treat each other with dignity. So I'm going to get off of this platform and get onto that one. And I want my kids to be on that one because they're going to hear from people talking about political issues with respect for each other. And I'm going to go to the subculture where people have a kind of a spiritual center in which they see that everybody has inherent dignity that's not going to be violated. Oh my God, I want to live there. Now, that doesn't stop them necessarily from voting in ways that the dominant culture rewards, which is contempt and hostility and dehumanization and humiliation. But it starts to lay the groundwork for an alternative. That's our view.
We briefly mentioned Arthur Brooks, and I forgot the exact term, outrage. What is it? Outrage?
He calls it the outrage industrial complex. He's modeling President Eisenhower, reminding us in the 1950s to worry about the military industrial complex. This is President Eisenhower's terms, to be cautious about the growth of these large forces in our culture. Arthur says there's a new set of large forces in our culture. He calls them the outrage industrial complex, where outrage is the rewarded behavior.
Yes.
And where the incentives all push us to be more and more outraged, as opposed to push us to be better problem solvers or relationship builders.
Well, the term that a group I'm working with has been using, which is very similar, is the conflict profiteers.
Yeah, Amanda Ripley talks about conflict entrepreneurs and profiteers, and look, that's real.
And that's sort of the challenge. And we had a meeting, a group of us, and maybe we're idealistic. You probably get that a lot, being people suggesting you're naive and optimistic, but we're trying to work on a plan to challenge the conflict profiteers, not challenge them directly, but create something, maybe trolling for good, because an essential belief we have that people do like joy and togetherness and community. So perhaps if we can figure out how to market it and it's profitable, we can use the profit incentive, trolling for good instead of conflict. Any thoughts on that?
Well, look, there's no doubt that people would prefer to live in harmony with others, feeling seen and valued by others, being able to contribute to the lives of others, feeling safe in their professional life or their religious or spiritual or cultural habits. But that's what people want. And people buy that stuff like crazy. Go into the self-help section of Amazon. There's huge sales. Watch Netflix. There's huge followings for Ted Lasso. I mean, what is Ted Lasso? I mean, everybody's going to say, oh, yeah, well, people watch Ted Lasso, and they also watch, and then they're going to repeat 15 things that are full of contempt. I get it. We have both, Freud came to understand that we have both forces within us. The ancient biblical authors said, hey, there's a little angel in you and there's a little devil in you. We got both. Depending on which tradition you come from, I think we all, if we're self-aware, know that there are parts of us that are drawn to contempt, I dare say hatred, and parts of us that are drawn to dignity and I dare say love. And, which part of us we feed and which part of us we get to live with more determines whether we're happy or not. Look, everybody, talks about these things as though they're abstract. There's only really one thing. Social science tells us, you want to find out what contributes to happiness. People say, well, income and stuff like that, it does matter up to a point. But beyond a certain point, really the only factor that contributes to happiness is the strength of our relationships. So at some level, we know we want to be in healthy, hopeful, joyful relationships with other people. That's just what we want. Now, it can feel good to punch people when we feel our dignity's been attacked, when we feel like we've been treated badly. We want to punch back. I get it. We all want to do that. The question of the Dignity Index really just asks us is how? How do you want to push back? And do you want to push back by continuing the cycle of hatred? Do you want to use oppositional energy, which will create oppositional energy in return? Do you want to demonize people you disagree with, which will make them more likely to disagree with you? Or do you want another strategy? Do you actually want to listen to people, which will make them more open to your point of view? Do you want to invite people in rather than calling them out, which will make it more likely that you can ease divisions? Look, you're right. Is it idealistic? If that's idealism, count me guilty.
Right.
I grew up with parents who were idealistic, practically idealistic. I grew up with a mother who saw people with intellectual disabilities locked up in institutions and said, I want to change the whole damn thing. And everybody said, you're idealistic, Eunice. You're idealistic. And you know what she did? She just went ahead and changed the whole damn thing.
Well, there you go.
And I grew up with a dad who's wanted to make the United States into a force for good in the developing world. Oh, you're idealistic. Military will do that, and business will do that. And he said, well, I want to send young people into the Peace Corps. And you know what? After 50 years, hundreds of thousands of Peace Corps volunteers, we have and understand the world much better, and the world understands us much better because of them.
And people probably thought you were idealistic with the Special Olympics. So
yeah, I mean, it's crazy, right? It's crazy to go to China or to go to Russia or to go to Syria or to go to Lebanon or to go to Saudi Arabia or to go to Germany or France or to go to South Africa or Kenya or Peru or Paraguay and say we're going to open the doors of opportunity to children with intellectual disabilities to grow up together with their non-disabled peers. Come on, they have bigger problems in those countries. And they don't like Americans in some of those countries, and they don't believe in human rights in some of those countries. We say to hell with all that. We're going anyway. That's the way I roll.
Yeah, well, it's worked pretty well for you. So with regard to the Dignity Index, is there a plan on where to take it in the next?
Yeah, David, we've gotten huge amount of interest from places we didn't expect. So we've had a lot of interest from business. Businesses want their workplaces to feel like places where disagreement can be healthy, where problems get solved, where differences of opinion are integrated into good solutions. So we've had people say, hey, look, will you train our whole company in the Dignity Index and show us how we can learn to use dignity within the company? That surprised us, but that's growing rapidly. We've had a lot of interest in the K-12 space. We want to teach our kids how to disagree with dignity. We want to teach our kids how to treat each other well, even when they have differences. So we've got school districts in different parts of the country that are working with us to write lesson plans on how to teach the Dignity Index. And we have governors, too. We've worked with the NGA, Governor Cox, Governor Stitt, Governor Moore in Maryland, Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania. These are all places where we've, Governor Polis in Colorado just recently. These are political leaders who are in the outrage industrial complex who are trying to break out of it and just try different strategies. So, look, who knows? We may prevail, David. You never know.
This might be a stretch a little, Tim, and be honest with me if it is, but we're having a lot of discussions related to DEI and the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the cultural war that has become. And you mentioned that the corporate world has become involved in the Dignity Index. I wonder if there could be a relationship there. If a connection, DEI has been characterized in all these awful ways by certain people, but isn't it really just about dignity?
It's funny you say this. We've been invited by one of the campuses of the University of Wisconsin, where they have either had to or wanted to get rid of their DEI program. Guess what they're replacing it with? The Dignity program.
Is that right? There you go. Okay.
So I think at the heart of the DEI work has been an attempt to try to heal relationships where there has been exclusion or demonization or humiliation or injustice, to bring those issues to the fore, but by healing the relationships. It basically, if I had to write a mission statement for the whole DEI world, it would be, we want everybody to be treated with dignity. And so I think what people have disagreed with is not that. They've disagreed with some of the tactics.
Yes.
Okay? So if we can find the tactics that actually achieve that goal, I don't think we have a lot of Republicans are going to hate it, or a lot of Democrats are going to hate it on either, maybe people on the extremes. But for the most part, most of us in the broader diversity, the Special Olympics movement is in the inclusion, in the I space. Almost nobody fights Special Olympics.
That's right. Yes.
Because it's trying to bring dignity to the core of how we treat each other, so we'll be more inclusive. I don't think that's going to inflame the political right or the political left or something like that. It's going to attract the political right and the political left. So I just think we have a tactical issue in that space. I don't think Americans in particular are giving up on the idea that all people are created equal.
No.
And I don't think Americans are giving up on the idea that everybody deserves a chance in this country. And I don't think Americans are giving up on the idea that we actually want to be a country where we actually treat our neighbors with dignity and respect. I think almost every American thinks those things. So if DEI can help us do those things, then I think we'll figure out how to do it in a way that brings people together rather than splits them apart.
You and I agree a lot because I believe in adaptive strategy and adapting one's strategy and how one markets things and phrases things doesn't mean you're giving up.
And sometimes I was 15 years building the social and emotional learning movement. We made a lot of mistakes. I mean, come on. You're starting something from scratch in some ways, trying to figure out how to teach self-regulation and relationship skills. You're going to make mistakes. I don't run around saying we never made a mistake. And when some states have said, well, we don't like this part of the SEL, the social and emotional learning, I say, okay, well, let's try to let's see if we can fix it. I mean, I'm not ideological about anything except the core human value of dignity. That's the only thing I will not compromise on.
Yeah. Well, I have my own.
But after that, we can be very creative on how we get there.
Right. Well, I have my own little saying. The only thing I'm ideological about, the only thing I'm partisan about is democracy.
There you go.
Yes. But related to our discussion, one of the great challenges of our time, and it's probably related to dignity, is fulfilling the motto of our country, e pluribus unum. And we live in a pluralistic society. That's the reality. And if we don't figure out how we're going to all live together, our democracy simply isn't going to work. And that's what I see as one of the great benefits of the Dignity Index. We just have to figure this out.
My view, David, is, you say we live in a pluralistic society. Some people say that as like, well, we have to admit that we might not like it, but I think the opposite. I think, thank God. What a privilege. I mean, let's remember. I mean, I don't want to sound kind of like, rah, rah, rah American too much. Some people might be turned off by it. But I'd say probably if you knocked on the door of about 1 billion people around the world tomorrow morning and said, hey, guess what? You get to move to the United States. I bet about 3/4 of them would say, here's my bag, I'm ready to go. This is a country that has enormous appeal to people around the world still, despite all of our weaknesses, all of our failings, all of our challenges, even in the face of this divisive moment in our country. Most people see in us the possibility that people have a chance, the possibility that equality will prevail, the possibility that democratic institutions will allow the free growth of free enterprise and free expression of ideas, freedom of religion. And these are things most people don't take for granted. Maybe we do, but most people don't. We got a lot of assets in this country. And pluralism is one of our assets.
And to piggyback on what you're saying, people think I'm bipartisan and that means just splitting the middle, splitting the difference, and that's all it is. And I believe the work we are doing, the work the Bridge Alliance and all of the organizations are doing is much bigger than splitting the difference. It's taking the best from the left, the best from the right, the best from independence, the best of what hasn't even been thought of yet. And when I heard you talking about pluralism, it's sort of the same as that. Our country can go to a new level if we take the best from what every ethnic, religious, and racial group in our country has to offer. We're going to be much better. So maybe I should reframe what I said. It's not just trying to figure out how it's going to work, but if we do figure out, it's going to take our nation to a new level, I believe.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm glad you brought up this idea that you're not just a centrist, because that's a quick misunderstanding when people hear Bridge Alliance or they hear Dignity Index. Oh, you just want everybody to get along, or you want everybody to neutralize their passions, or you want everybody to give up their principles and just compromise with the status quo. Wrong, wrong, wrong. I want people to live their passions and their principles with vigor and and real determination. I want people to march on the streets if they think they should. I want people to organize voting blocks if they think they must. I want people to go to their school board meetings or their city meetings or their legislators. I want people to have all the principle and passion in the world. And I want them to add one principle, and that is treat other people with dignity. Because almost every passionate person I know is passionate because they think the outcome of their work will create a situation where their dignity and the dignity of others is elevated. So use that principle in your work. Don't dim your passion, add to your passion, and make the means by which you achieve your principle the outcome you hope for, that everyone is treated with dignity, even those with whom you disagree with most passionately.
Well, that's pretty powerful. And I should end it there, but I'll ask another question. I end on a high note. But you had a call which I was on. There are hundreds of thousands of people. I think were on the call a few years ago, a Unite call.
Yeah.
I think Oprah Winfrey and others were on the call.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I have two questions. Do you plan on having any others like that?
Well,
That'll be my first question, then I should probably follow up to that.
Well, the answer is we don't have a plan. It'll be the 5-year anniversary of the call to unite, which was right at the beginning of the pandemic. That's why we had it, because we felt like the country risked splitting, and we wanted to invite the voices of Americans and people from all over the world. We had Bishop Tutu, we had the Patriarch of Constantinople, we had Presidents Clinton and Bush, and we had T.D. Jakes and Oprah and Rick Warren. We had the Alvin Ailey dancers. We had nurses and doctors of all sorts and stripes. We had spiritual leaders like Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams and the Helminskis and Richard Rohr. I mean, we had lots of different people. It was 25 hours, by the way, so I was up for 25 straight hours. So someone just asked me the other day, are you going to have a 5-year anniversary? That would put us on a path to putting something together for this April. Here's what I know from that. The book we published called The Call to Unite has the voices of many, almost all the people that were on that 25-hour live stream. There's a lot of good in people. And it comes from all sides. And there's a lot of love out there. There's a lot of hope. There's a lot of pain in our country that people want to feel seen in their pain. They want to feel understood. They want people to help them end it. So there's a lot of good in this nation. And if we need to do this work like you're doing with this podcast, I have a podcast. It's called Need a Lift. I'm calling the people that come on it lifters, because there are people who go into the pain and go into the conflict and they come out of it with love and dignity and compassion and real solutions for people, whether they're dealing with addiction, whether they're dealing with loss and grief, whether they're dealing with disability or other kinds of things. So I don't know, maybe we'll do a 5-year anniversary. We probably need someone to come along and say, hey, look, I'll support that. We'll get a sponsor. You never know. But the larger story is that it's happening all the time. What's that?
We have a vast audience here in the City Biz audience.
Yeah, well, if anybody listening here thinks it would be great to pull that community of people and more back together, maybe for a one-shot, one-day reminder of all the possibilities and all the hope and awakening in our country, call me up. Maybe we should pull it together.
I think that would be fabulous, and that's a great way to end. You now gave me a job for the next month or two.
Excellent. Thank goodness.
Happy. I'm a strong believer. The Fulcrum's not a bad meeting.
Fantastic. It's fantastic.
But, to really create a powerful democracy reform movement, I think we need to do it through pop culture and engage people with emotion and song and dance and theater. And comedy. So we're going to get in touch. And thank you so much, Tim. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you, David, for all you're doing and for including me.
Okay. Thank you. Take care.